Hello everyone and welcome to our module on gestational tumors. Gestational trophoblastic disease is the name given to a number of conditions that are a rare variant of pregnancy. In these conditions, a sperm and an egg come together, but instead of forming an embryo and the placenta, they form a neoplasm. The neoplasms involve trophoblastic or placental tissue, and luckily they are usually benign, including the most common type called a molar pregnancy, but rarely they are malignant and can metastasize outside of the uterus. Let's start by talking about a hydatidiform mole, which is also called a molar pregnancy. This is the most common form of gestational trophoblastic disease. The word hydatid means a fluid-filled cyst, and mola is the Greek word for false pregnancy. So this disorder gets its name because fluid-filled cysts form in the uterus instead of a normal pregnancy. It's caused by a malignant growth of trophoblastic tissue that develops into swollen chorionic villi. The villi form clusters, and for that reason, when you look at a path specimen of a hydatidiform mole, it's often described as having the appearance of a cluster of grapes. On ultrasound, the classic description is a snowstorm appearance, and I'll show you a picture of that in the next slide. So this is what a molar pregnancy looks like on ultrasound. So the woman undergoes an ultrasound looking to see if she's pregnant, and instead you see all these black circles. Those are the swollen chorionic villi of a hydatidiform mole. There are two subtypes of hydatidiform mole. The first type is called a complete mole. This is the more common type. This is caused by fertilization of an empty egg. So the woman has an egg with no chromosomal material inside of it. The sperm fertilizes that egg, and you develop a structure where all the chromosomes are of paternal origin and no maternal chromosomes are present. This is what can develop into a complete hydatidiform mole. If you do a karyotype analysis of the cells in a complete hydatidiform mole, they will usually be 46XX. The reason they have this karyotype is because the haploid sperm usually duplicates once it gets inside the empty egg. So a 23X haploid gamete of a sperm gets inside the empty egg and duplicates and becomes 46XX. You will never see 46YY because having two Y chromosomes is lethal and the cells will die. Rarely, a complete mole can be made up of 46XY chromosomes. This happens if the empty egg is fertilized by two sperms at the same time and one of them has an X chromosome and one has a Y. There is a special type of immunostaining that can be done to identify complete moles. It's staining for the P57 protein. P57 is a cyclin-dependent kinase, and it is only expressed on maternal chromosomes. It is imprinted, so it's not expressed by paternal chromosomes. And I talk about the genetic process of imprinting in a video in the genetics section, but for our purposes here, what this means is that P57 will only be expressed if maternal chromosomes are present inside the hydatidiform mole. And in a complete mole, there are only paternal chromosomes, so those cells of that molar pregnancy will be P57 negative. In a complete hydatidiform mole, there is no fetal tissue. There is only trophoblastic placental tissue. The reason for this is because it turns out maternal chromosome material is necessary for any fetal tissue to develop. So in a complete mole with only paternal chromosomes, there will be no fetal tissue. With no fetus to drain the villi of blood, the villi become massively swollen, and that's how the swollen villi in a complete mole develop. And as I mentioned before, this is the most common form of molar pregnancy, and a hydatidiform mole is the most common type of gestational trophoblastic disease. The less common type of molar pregnancy is called a partial mole. In this type of malignancy, there is some fetal tissue. That's because some maternal chromosomal material is found in the malignant cells. This type of molar pregnancy is caused by fertilization of a normal egg by two sperm. So we have a normal egg that is haploid with maternal chromosomes, and two paternal sperms fertilize it at the same time. Now, because maternal chromosomal material is present, there will be some formation of fetal tissue and some drainage of the villi that form. And for this reason, the villi in a partial molar pregnancy are less swollen. Because you have a haploid maternal egg fertilized by two sperms, the cells are usually triploid, so they will be 69XX or 69XXY. Very rarely they can be 69XYY, but remember, when you have two Y chromosomes in a cell, those cells usually will not grow. And in contrast to the complete moles, partial moles are P57 positive because they have some maternal genetic material. Let's talk about the clinical features of a molar pregnancy, and I'll start by focusing on the features of a complete molar pregnancy, the more common type. So unfortunately, in this disorder, it initially may appear to be a normal pregnancy. There will be a positive pregnancy test, and the uterus will begin to enlarge. What often happens is there's a size-date discrepancy of the uterus, so you can measure the size of a woman's uterus and determine whether it's appropriate for her stage of pregnancy. In a complete molar pregnancy, because those villi are so swollen, the uterus will measure too big for the stage of pregnancy. There's also often painless uterine bleeding early in the pregnancy. That's because of separation of the molar villi from the decidua. So those villi are not normal and they do not implant normally, and they often separate and allow blood to leak out. And for any of these findings, a size, date discrepancy, or uterine bleeding, that often leads to an ultrasound, and then on an ultrasound you see that snowstorm appearance and you realize it's not a normal pregnancy, it's a molar pregnancy. Some other clinical features are shown on this slide. Hyperemesis gravidarum is severe nausea and vomiting that leads to weight loss. This can occur in a normal pregnancy, but it's common in molar pregnancies. The maternal serum HCG level may get much higher than normal for gestational age in these types of pregnancies. Remember, this is a malignancy of placental tissue, and the placental tissue makes HCG. So the level can get very high, much higher than it should be for an early stage of pregnancy. In fact, sometimes it can get over 100,000 early in pregnancy, which is an extremely high level. There's also a special type of ovarian cyst that sometimes forms in a molar pregnancy. It's called a theca lutein cyst. This is caused by ovarian stimulation by HCG, and it's often bilateral because the high HCG level stimulates both ovaries. Women can also potentially develop hyperthyroidism in a molar pregnancy. This requires very high levels of HCG. The exact etiology is not known, but it's believed to be related to the fact that HCG can stimulate the TSH receptor. Remember that HCG and TSH both share a similar alpha subunit, so when the level of HCG gets very high, it's thought that that begins to drive the TSH receptors in the thyroid. The TSH level will obviously be low because the pituitary gland is trying to decrease the amount of thyroid hormone produced by the thyroid gland, but the T3 and T4 levels will be high because the thyroid gland is being stimulated by HCG. And then finally, preeclampsia normally occurs in the third trimester in normal pregnancies. If you ever read a case where preeclampsia occurs in the first 20 weeks, meaning in the first trimester, one of the things you should think about is a molar pregnancy. A classic feature of this disorder is for preeclampsia, meaning hypertension and proteinuria, to occur in the first trimester before 20 weeks. The clinical features of a partial molar pregnancy are a little bit different from a complete molar pregnancy. First of all, the uterus usually does not get as big in a partial molar pregnancy. The size may be normal because there is some fetal material to drain those chorionic villi. And in fact, the size may even be small for gestational age because the fetus is growing slowly, but it's draining those villi. And then finally, you tend to see a less dramatic increase in HCG in the partial molar pregnancies. Once again, that's because some of the tissue is going to form fetal tissue. It's not all going to form chorionic tissue that creates the HCG. The treatment of molar pregnancy is usually with uterine suction curettage. Curettage is a procedure where you use a curette, which is a surgical instrument that can scrape the lining of the uterus, and a suction curettage means you use a special type of curette attached to a vacuum suction device. Rarely a hysterectomy is required, and in some special cases chemotherapy is used. The drugs that are usually used are methotrexate or actinomycin D. This is only for high-risk patients where the features of the molar pregnancy are thought to suggest a high likelihood of progression to a malignant form of gestational trophoblastic disease called choriocarcinoma. So that's a nice segue into choriocarcinoma, which is a rare malignant gestational neoplasm. Remember what I told you before, a molar pregnancy is benign, meaning that it does not metastasize. Choriocarcinoma, on the other hand, is malignant and can spread. Sometimes this develops following a normal pregnancy. This is very unfortunate. A woman will deliver a baby and then find out that she has developed choriocarcinoma as a result of the pregnancy. It can also follow a miscarriage. And then sometimes it follows a molar pregnancy, especially complete molar pregnancies. As I said before, molar pregnancies are benign, but 15% of them will develop into locally invasive choriocarcinoma. 5% will develop into metastatic disease. And that's why I told you on the last slide, in some cases of high-risk molar pregnancy, chemotherapy is considered. Partial moles, it turns out, are much less likely to develop into choriocarcinoma. Less than 5% develop into any form of invasive disease. So just like molar pregnancies, a choriocarcinoma is a malignancy of trophoblastic tissue, and therefore it makes lots and lots of HCG. So if you're worried that a woman who had a molar pregnancy might be developing into a choriocarcinoma, you can track her HCG level. And in fact, it's imperative to monitor the HCG level after a molar pregnancy. Remember that I said the HCG level gets very, very high in a molar pregnancy. It should fall after treatment. If it falls and then plateaus, this suggests that the woman has developed a choriocarcinoma following her molar pregnancy. Choriocarcinoma is a malignancy of syncytia trophoblast and cytotrophoblast cells. These are highly malignant aberrant cells, so they will not form any normal structures like villi, and this is a contrast to molar pregnancies where villi normally form. Choriocarcinoma is famous for early spread with extensive metastases. It spreads hematogenously, and 80% of the time it metastasizes to the lungs. This is an X-ray of someone with extensive lung mets, and the classic clinical presentation of this tumor for the boards is a woman who recently had either a normal pregnancy or a molar pregnancy and now develops cough and an X-ray like this. She probably has choriocarcinoma. Some of the symptoms of choriocarcinoma are shown on this slide. It can cause vaginal bleeding, just like a molar pregnancy. Because it often metastasizes to the lungs, cough and hemoptysis may be present at presentation. The HCG level will be high on serum testing, and sometimes you can see the same symptoms you see in molar pregnancy from high HCG levels, symptoms like ovarian cysts and hyperthyroidism. One good thing about this malignancy is that it is usually highly sensitive to chemotherapy. Methotrexate or actinomycin D are the agents that are typically used, and most patients are ultimately cured. I'll finish with this slide and mention non-gestational choriocarcinoma. So choriocarcinoma can occur outside of a pregnancy setting. It's a rare germ cell tumor. Remember that the germ cells in the ovaries and the testes are what ultimately develop into trophoblastic tissue in a pregnancy. This means that they are capable of forming choriocarcinoma, which is a malignancy of trophoblastic tissue. So sometimes in rare instances, choriocarcinoma occurs in the ovaries or testes unrelated to a pregnancy. The germ cells differentiate into trophoblasts, and this develops into malignancy. Histologically, it's exactly the same as gestational choriocarcinoma. It looks the same under the microscope. It also produces beta-HCG, just like pregnancy-associated choriocarcinoma. The one difference is that the tumors that arise in the ovaries and testes are more difficult to cure and tend to be less responsive to chemotherapy. And that concludes our video on gestational tumors.